Chapter 3. The stack of papers on Vivi's desk was sea-creaming. Well, wailing, really. A sort of high-pitched shriek. Frowning, she turned away from her computer and the email. She'd been sending her department head to study the papers there on the corner, as they emitted a high sort of wailing sound. With narrowed eyes, Vivi reached for the essays, tossing one after another onto her desk until she found the one she was looking for. Not only did it appear to be shrieking, but the typed letters were slowly bleeding into red. Cheater, cheater, pumpkin eater, she muttered as she checked the name typed in the top corner. Hainsley Barnes. Ah yes, Mr. Lacrosse. No shock there, then. He'd missed her last few classes, and apparently no one from last semester had bothered to tell him that Miss Jones was particularly good at sussing out cheaters. Being a witch had so many unexpected perks. Smoothing her hand over the paper, Vivi removed the spell. Watching the words turn back to black as the piercing whine slowly faded away, then flagged it with a red post-it before tossing it in a drawer. What in God's name was that sound? Vivi's favorite colleague in the history department, Ezichi, stood in the doorway, wrinkling her nose, and, as the paper continued to whimper in Vivi's desk, she gave the drawer a discreet punch. Alarm on my phone, she answered as the sound abruptly cut off, reminding me that I was supposed to wrap up here. She checked the time on her computer. Shit, 30 minutes ago? It was the third time this week she'd been late for the family dinner her Aunt Elaine was so fanatical about, but such was midterm. Vivi shot up from her desk, grabbing her jacket from the back of the chair and her purse as Ezzy pointed at her. Girl, do not disappoint the woman who makes my favorite bath salts, she said, and Vivi reached into her bag, pulling out a small muslin sack. Speaking of, she said to give these to you, so thanks for reminding me. Ezzy took the bag from Vivi like it contained precious gems, holding it to her chest and taking a deep breath. No offense, Vivi, but I love your aunt more than I love you. None taken, Vivi said. She's magic. Literally. Not that Easy knew that. Vivi had made the decision when she'd finished her undergrad at Penhaven College that she'd do a master's in history. It's regular human history, and that she'd teach regular human kids, as opposed to the witches that took Penhaven's other, slightly more secretive classes. So far, it was a decision she hadn't regretted, even if she did suspect she worked a lot harder teaching Intro to World Civ than she would have if she'd been teaching ritual candle making. As Vivi jogged up the steps and out of the basement that housed the history department's junior lecturers' offices, she pulled on her jacket and attempted to text Gwen at the same time, running ladder. As soon as she hit the doors, her phone pinged in her hand. I speak Vivi, so I know that means you're running late. Don't text and drive. Or text and walk, either. Grinning, Vivi headed out into the quad. It wasn't dark yet, and the October night was pretty mild, even up here in the mountains. Nestled in the valley, Penhaven College was a little gem of red brick buildings and green grass, tall oak trees and neatly trimmed hedges, and Vivi loved it more than a person should probably love her workplace. But she did love it, especially now with the first hint of fall in the air, the leaves orange, the sky purple. Penhaven was always at its best in the autumn. So was all of Graves Glen. Vivi noticed that the decorations for tomorrow's Founders' Day, the beginning of Graves Glen's big Halloween season, were up. There were the electric candles in the window of the written word, the town's bookshop, and plastic pumpkin decals stuck to the door of Coffee Cauldron. Of course, Elaine and Gwen's store, Something Wicked, was all decked out, and Vivi was pretty sure she even spotted a dangling bat in front of her accountant's office. She hadn't grown up in this little slice of perfection in the North Georgia mountains. Her parents had lived in Atlanta, and while Vivi missed them both a lot, she'd always be grateful she'd landed here in this spot that felt tailor-made for her somehow. This perfect small town where she could balance being a witch and a regular woman. Best of both worlds. Elaine's house was set high on a hill at the end of a winding road, and as Vivi drove up under the bright orange and red leaves, her tires bumping on the dirt road, she felt her shoulders start to relax a little, and once the cabin came into sight, she actually sighed with happiness. Home. Once she'd parked behind Elaine's ancient Volvo, Vivi jogged up the front steps, past the grinning pumpkins and dangling bats and little lights in the shape of purple witches. Aunt Elaine always went all in for Halloween. Just inside, Vivi stopped to pet Sir Perivale, where he was curled up in his basket. He was massive now, a hulking mass of black fur and green eyes who adored Gwen and tolerated Elaine and Vivi, and she considered herself lucky when he only took the laziest of swats at her hand before settling back into sleep. "I know, I'm late again," Vivi called out as she gave him one. Last pet. Elaine drifted into the hallway, her ash blonde hair piled messily on top of her head, her black skirts brushing the floor. If Stevie Nicks taught middle school art was the way Gwyn always described her mother's look, and that was not far off. But it worked on Aunt Elaine in a way Vivi never could have pulled off. She'd stick to her floral prints and polka dots. "You know," Aunt Elaine said, placing a beeringed hand on her hip, "if you'd just come to work for me, you would be around all the time and never have to worry about being late." An old argument, and one that, as usual, Vivi waved off. "You two do fine without me." Something Wicked sold various witchy things, from candles to scarves to soap, with the occasional homemade jam thrown in. Business always picked up this time of year, thanks to Founders' Day, but it wasn't unusual for them to go days without a single sale, so Elaine and Gwyn could easily run the place by themselves. "We might do even better with you, though," Elaine said as Vivi moved down the hallway and into the kitchen. Of all the rooms in the house, this one always felt the most witchy. Copper pots hanging from hooks on the ceiling, little pots of herbs all along the windowsill, Elaine's candle-making supplies cluttered on the table. The effect was only slightly spoiled by Gwyn standing by the stove, wearing a t-shirt that said, "Witch don't kill my vibe," and eating macaroni and cheese out of the pot. "Business has picked up so much in the last few years," Elaine went on, languidly moving back toward the table. "Gwyn can barely keep up with the online orders." Gwyn nodded, her messy bun of red hair nearly coming undone. "Everyone's a witch these days," she said, mouth full. "We sold like 100 sets of tarot cards last month alone." Vivi raised her eyebrows as she went to the fridge to grab a bottle of wine. "Geez, seriously?" Her aunt's business had always been more of a hobby than an actual moneymaker, but Elaine had refused to get anything resembling a real job, and Gwyn wasn't all that inclined to join the workforce either. "Self-care and all that," she said now, placing the pot back on the stove and crossing one foot over the other. Glancing down, Vivi could see she was wearing the bright green and black striped socks that were perpetual bestsellers at Something Wicked. Tarot cards, crystals, candles, grimoires, ... Gwyn ticked the items off on her fingers. "We can barely keep things in stock. I'm going to have to hire someone just to handle the online store." "You could totally do that." "I like my job," Vivi insisted, and the truth was, she did. Sure, there were the occasional lacrosse cheaters, but she could more than handle them, and she loved going to work on Penhaven's campus. She loved going to the big cafeteria for lunch, loved her office with its comfy chairs, loved sharing her own love of history with her students. All in all, it was a good fit, and it made her feel ... stable, safe, two of Vivi's favorite words. As Vivi opened the wine, Gwyn's phone buzzed, and she sighed. "I swear to the goddess, if this is another text about Founders' Day shit, I am going to go full carry on this town." "The mayor," Elaine said to Vivi in a stage whisper. "She keeps texting Gwyn about Founders' Day because she has a crush on her, and this is her way of getting Gwyn to pay attention to her?" "A solid move," Vivi allowed, pouring herself some wine, and Gwyn rolled her eyes. "I've already slept with her mom, it's not that." "Also a solid move." Vivi lifted her glass, and distracted, Gwyn clinked her own against it. "No, she's just freaking out because it's her first Founders' Day as mayor and she wants everything to go well," Gwyn said, her fingers moving rapidly over the phone. "And she's a normal who-man, not a witch, so you can see where these kinds of things stress her out." "Does she know you're a witch?" Vivi asked, and Gwyn blew a raspberry. "God, no. That is privileged information one only gets after the 4th date." "You never go on a 4th date, darling," Elaine said, lining up her candles on the table. "Exactly," Gwyn said with a wink. She went to put her phone back in her pocket, only to have it buzz again, and she groaned. "Jane, honestly, you're hot, but the sex was not good enough to warrant how?" "Shit. What?" Vivi and Elaine asked in unison as Gwyn stared at her phone, her eyes wide. Nothing. Nothing at all. She sent me a nude." "I'm shocked and scandalized by the nude." Hastily shoving her phone in her back pocket, Gwyn picked up her wine and turned her attention to Vivi. "So, how is teaching the normies going?" Vivi said, placing a hand on her hip. "You are the worst liar in the entire world, Guinevere Jones. What did Jane say that made you make that face?" Gwyn looked between Vivi and Elaine, who was watching her with eyebrows raised, and finally groaned, wine sloshing out of her glass as she threw up her hands. "Because it's the 100th anniversary of the town's founding, they're sending a penhallow." For a long moment, there was nothing but silence in the kitchen as all three women took that in. A Penhallow. Vivi sipped her wine. There were lots of Penhallows. Okay, there were 4 that she knew about. Simon Penhallow, terrifying witch, and his 3 sons, one of whom had shattered her heart into a billion pieces when she was 19, which had been a long time ago, and was the thing she had completely moved past. Mostly. It might not be him, Elaine finally said, turning back to her candles. Might be that nightmare of a father of his. Probably is, Vivi agreed. 100th is a big deal. And while Reese might have changed a lot in the past 9 years, I still don't see him as being the one you'd send for big ceremonial things, right? Oh, totally, Gwyn said, nodding and pouring more wine into her glass. You send in Reese for the fun shit like solstice revels and those weird summer courses the college offers. You don't send him in to charge the ley lines. Of course you don't, Vivi said. I'm sure they wouldn't dream of it, Elaine declared, tapping the table for emphasis. But Gwyn added slowly, maybe we should check?